Hey, I'm Zarina Matcha and you're watching Non-Feminist Gal. One of my favorite YouTube channels used to be The Take, a large channel on YouTube that used to make positive, insightful and interesting film and TV critique, but in recent years has been reduced to regurgitating woke feminist propaganda. I have already watched the video and already made some notes, so what I'm going to do is essentially watch the video and sort of pause it and comment on it as I'm watching it while also referring to my notes.
Is feminism going out of fashion? In June 2022, the New York Times' Michelle Goldberg wrote a piece entitled "The Future Isn't Female Anymore," about growing agreement that mainstream feminism had grown stale and somewhat embarrassing, that it failed to speak to the realities of many women's lives, and that it lacked a vision of a better world.
We had the women's marches and the pink hats, and it meant a lot in terms of women turning out to vote. But I don't see that right now.
This crisis in the feminism movement couldn't really come at a worse time for American women. There's the Supreme Court's overturning of Roe v. Wade, how the COVID-19 pandemic disproportionately put women out of work, problems like workplace sexual harassment and unequal pay that aren't going away and may be getting worse, and a Me Too backlash in full swing that's unleashed a torrent of shocking misogyny. Weirdest of all, there doesn't seem to be an organized political movement or even a coherent, relatable, popular feminist rhetoric to fight back.
There's, I think, a feeling of exhaustion, despair, disillusionment right now that is incompatible with a lot of activism.
So how did we get here when a mere 6 years ago, Me Too's culture?
So first of all, the whole Roe v. Wade thing, I actually made a video talking about this. This is more of an issue of religion versus science and the influence of Christianity in politics, particularly in American politics, which is what has made abortion such a contentious issue. Most atheists and non-religious folk are generally quite neutral on abortion, and opposition to abortion does mainly come from religious people, as we've seen that the states in America where abortion is now illegal are all either in the Bible Belt or have a very large conservative Christian influence. Secondly, most people were out of work during the pandemic, not just women. Feminism has always held a very strong opposition to women being housewives and stay-at-home mothers, and seems to think that women's only value comes in working. Maybe it's simply that more women are deciding that they don't want to be out working and are instead much happier being at home. There's now this rising tradwife movement, which I'm not a fan of. I do think it's a bit cringe, but whatever. Maybe more women are just happier being at home. Feminism for decades now has really pushed onto women this whole idea that having a career and doing a job is more fulfilling than being at home or being a stay-at-home wife and mother. And even though I personally am, a very, very career-driven woman, I don't really understand why feminism really looks down on women who choose to be stay-at-home wives and mothers. Like, why is that bad? Why is that so devalued? The pandemic affected everybody, not just women. This is so biased, and it's just very, very typical. Feminism always has this huge bias of looking at things from a very female-first perspective. As for the pay gap, well, we know that isn't real. We already know this. I don't know why the feminist movement for years keeps on insisting that women are paid less than men for doing the same job. Women are not paid less than men for doing the same job. We typically work shorter hours and choose lower paying professions. There is no gender-based discrimination, certainly not in the UK and very doubtfully in the USA either. In terms of feminism not really having an organized movement, the reason for this is that feminism as a movement pretty much crumbled in the 1980s as various factions and subgroups of feminism became formed. Suddenly we have intersectional feminism, lipstick feminism, Marxist feminism, black feminism, conservative feminism, and so on. Feminism is not a movement that resonates with most women because at its core, feminism is about women fighting the patriarchy, even though this idea is very, very flawed, and I'm going to do a future video talking about this. Since most women don't dislike men, do want to have positive and meaningful relationships with men, and don't feel oppressed by the so-called patriarchy, most women can't really be feminists. It just isn't an ideology that resonates with the average woman. Most women call themselves feminists because of social pressure and because feminism is often branded as being synonymous with gender equality when it really isn't.
This cultural moment seemed to promise a new era. And is it possible to channel all these setbacks to reignite our passion for women's rights with a more meaningful feminist framework for our times? In some ways, it's impossible to deny recent years have seen progress in making feminism more mainstream. Far more women describe themselves as feminists.
Statistically speaking, most women don't actually identify as feminists. There's just a great amount of feminist lobbying and media propaganda which pushes this bias, when in actuality the average woman is not really a feminist, and certainly not the kind of radical extreme feminist anyway.
And post-Me Too, there's at least more public scrutiny on men in power. At the same time, though, we're in the midst of a growing, scary backlash to Me Too ideals. And more generally, many people, especially young ones, admit they find the available feminist rhetoric too performative, outrage-based, and often just cringe.
To the man that's taking up too much space on a bus, on the plane, on the bench, we see you. You don't need that much room.
Goldberg reported on a recent poll that found that not only young Republicans, but also a surprising number of young Democrats agreed with the statement that feminism has done more harm than good.
Feminism has done more harm than good. It's founded on this very, very toxic and unhealthy idea that women are systemically oppressed, and it creates this culture of antagonism between the sexes.
Arguably, it's the mainstreaming of feminism that's led to some of today's problems. As feminism came into vogue and became exploitable in capitalist venues in the 2010s, we conflated consumerism with empowerment. Girl boss feminism highlighted the examples of high-power individuals co-opting the girl power idea in service of only personal advancement without systemic change.
Well, this is pretty much proof that feminism, they've basically just admitted that feminism is not about supporting and celebrating individual hardworking women. If it was, then women who are hardworking and who make waves in modern industries would be supported. But as they've basically just said, they don't support that. They don't support. This is why we need to be very careful with this idea of choice feminism or liberal feminism. Choice feminism is not feminism. It's just women being empowered. I really think that female empowerment is not synonymous with feminism.
And as many of those prominent girl bosses proved disappointing, this tarnished the public view of female empowerment in general.
I'm malicious, and I own it.
Sorry, you own
Who I am, what I do, terrorizing my employees, and I'll never apologize.
Meanwhile, it seemed like we'd all been too busy posturing on social media to pay attention to how our rights were in the process of being eroded and the concrete problems facing most women weren't being addressed. As The Drift magazine wrote, for a long time now, we've had the sense that feminism is in trouble. In the years before the pandemic, its most prominent battles were about figureheads. These days, symbols no longer seem adequate or even all that meaningful. As actual conditions for working women and mothers across America fail to improve and get worse, Drift writes that we're witnessing a profound malaise and what has felt like a course reversal over the past 2 years. There's an overriding sense of hopelessness.
It's interesting how they're only focusing on mothers, but they don't say anything about fathers. Once again, they're only ever looking at it from one perspective. I'm sure that the pandemic did not only affect women, it affected both men and women. There's this constant idea that feminism has that women are somehow some systemically oppressed class and that we have it so much harder than men. In reality, we don't have it harder than men. Women have problems and men have problems. It's not like men don't have any problems. This is so ridiculous.
The movement of feminism can't be fully mainstream, palatable to everyone, or easily marketable. It must be radical in some ways.
Well, there you go. It must be radical in some ways. They're not even hiding it.
Feminism has been going in and out of fashion for decades.
Don't get her started on that femalism stuff.
Feminism.
For most of feminism's early history, it was not trendy, but radical and confrontational. The women who organized for suffrage in the early 1900s were often represented as undesirable and bitterly anti-male. And
I really cannot stand this constant conflating of the suffragettes with feminism. The suffragettes were not the same as feminists. They had completely different goals and aims. Their goals were to gain voting rights for women. That's it. They were fighting for women's right to vote. They were not fighting to overthrow the patriarchy. They were not fighting for any of the things which the later feminists of the 60s, run by Gloria Steinem and Betty Friedan, etc., were fighting for. And I don't know why, but these feminists completely forget that the suffragettes were very anti-abortion. Most of them were very family-oriented, very Christian-oriented. They did not have the same philosophy. In fact, the only thing they really had in common with the feminists is that they were women creating an activist movement. But not all female activism and not all female suffrage is the same as feminism.
The women who fought for policies like the Equal Pay Act, Title IX, and the Equal Rights Amendment were routinely branded as angry, man-hating lesbians.
Well, a lot of feminists were and are very angry and man-hating. This is a very prominent aspect of feminism, which is why many don't like and don't support feminism, because what woman wants to be affiliated with some angry man-hating movement?
And I say angry feminists like there's some other kind.
According to Gloria Steinem, her groundbreaking feminist magazine, Miss, founded in 1971, had a very hard time convincing companies and ad agencies that feminist readers were worth marketing to. Glamorous feminist figures like Steinem or Germaine Greer did enjoy a moment of rising cool in the late 60s and 70s, but this in turn led to an anti-feminist backlash in the 80s before the 1990s saw feminism come back in a more mainstream way than ever with the rise of girl power.
Girl power.
The girl power concept actually started out as an alternative anti-capitalist niche. It was coined by riot girl band Bikini Kill in 1991, who saw consumer culture as a big part of the problem sidelining and silencing girls. But when girl power was co-opted by arguably the most mainstream band of the 90s, the Spice Girls, it became consumer culture.
Blah, 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 girl power, feminism, do you know what I mean?
The Spice Girls' image of girl power celebrated positive things like friendship, individual empowerment, love, and peace. And their fans, girls and women, started to be valued as consumers to an unprecedented degree. But the girl power feminism of the 90s wasn't the kind of political, mission-driven feminism of the past. It was broader and vaguer. Any powerful woman was a positive symbol, regardless of her politics, her relationships with other women, or her beliefs about feminism.
This video pretty much confirms the fact that feminism has really never been a women's movement. Feminism doesn't support all women. It only supports feminist women. It doesn't support individual, hardworking women. It doesn't support conservative women. It doesn't support libertarian women. It supports predominantly left-wing, white, upper-middle-class, Anglophonic women. I do think that girl power is a good thing, but girl power to me really isn't the same as feminism, which again this video highlights. Girl power is more about empowering women in a pro-female sense, rather than being misandric and anti-men. Girl power is about individual women being powerful women, and they're right, it is very pro-capitalist. And I do genuinely think that feminism, generally speaking, is supposed to be anti-capitalism, because feminism is very, very rooted in Marxist thought. And I do think that people who support liberalism, people who support capitalism, can't really identify with the feminist movement, because liberals and people who support capitalism are all about the individual and hard work, and feminism is more about the whole collective. It's a very collectivist movement. It tends to go hand in hand with very neo-Marxist ideas.
Strong women became marketing tools, and the era's TV icons were what Afua Hirsch calls the superhuman women, starring in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Charmed, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and The X-Files.
So they have strong female icons throughout American cinema, and that still isn't a good thing. It's almost like if things are not on our terms, then they're wrong. That's what I'm trying to say. Feminism is not synonymous with female empowerment. Feminism is not about empowering individual women. It's about a group of women collectively coming together. It's a collectivist movement. It's a Marxist movement. It's a radical movement.
Girl power 90s gave way to the post-feminist 2000s, and feminism was portrayed as something outdated, whose goals had been achieved, despite evidence to the contrary. Female celebrities began distancing themselves from the label.
I'm not a feminist. I hail men. I love men.
And it became common for women to say that they were humanists rather than feminists, backing away from the confrontational aspects of what it would take for women to get an equal playing field. Female-driven movies and television boasted about starring empowered women, but tended to ultimately center heterosexual marriage and traditional gender roles.
Most women desire marriage. Romance is the highest selling genre of all time and is predominantly marketed to women. I am a romance author. I understand female psychology in the context of purchasing romantic literature. This is so ridiculous. I don't understand. Feminism has had this very, very largely historical antagonistic attitude towards marriage and towards romance. Yet romance is something that is very, very intrinsically desired within the female psyche. If you go on Amazon and search the romance genre, you will find tons and tons and tons of books, mostly written by women for women.
As 70s and 90s style started to come back into fashion, feminism also returned, this time as a new, apolitical feminist brand with even more marketing power, the Girl Boss.
I know that part of Waham's mission statement is lifting up every woman, but Can you really do that if the price point is so inaccessible?
Girl boss feminism, just like girl power before it, was not a political movement. Unlike being a true feminist, being a girl boss is about self-progression, particularly financial, at the expense of other people. Girl bosses and girl power put a feminist veneer over the apolitical, or sometimes anti-feminist, actions of wealthy, powerful capitalist women. Conflating their self-serving ideals with feminism meant that the movement's original mission, to elevate all women, was lost.
What's your favorite position? CEO.
Many women were no longer united in a fight, but clawing their way to the top over other women. All of that needed to change.
Capitalism has empowered women far more than feminism, in my opinion. It is literally capitalism which has given women the opportunity to pursue careers outside of the home. It is capitalism which has created things like the rise of modern digital appliances, which meant that housewives got to spend less time in the home and then more time to go and write the feminine mystique. I do think that at the end of the day, hard work and empowerment and self-improvement comes from within. And I think that these collectivist groups, they turn everything into a group effort. But in my opinion, it's not really the same. I think that individuals should empower themselves and we should strive to, I don't know, help everyone to have the power from within. I'm very into this. I've never really been the whole thing of this whole group thing, because in my experience, group tends to lead to mob mentality and you usually have people taking all the credit. Sometimes, of course, you do need to have groups, like you do need to have group activism sometimes, but I think, for example, when it comes to just ordinary day-to-day life, it's like, why does one woman need to elevate other women? Like, one woman should be teaching other women how to elevate themselves.
This pseudo-feminist, fantasy, tween, chick-lit bullshit is a devolution of the female mission. It's cancerous to the intelligence of young women.
And in 2017, change did come with the Me Too movement. After Alyssa Milano popularized Tarana Burke's hashtag in response to allegations of sexual assault against Harvey Weinstein, it opened up an unprecedented dialogue around sexual violence in Hollywood and beyond. Not only did the campaign energize women to come together through sharing stories, but more importantly, it also advocated for specific solutions to specific consequences of sexism and patriarchy.
Me Too was a good idea initially, but it then became essentially an anti-male witch hunt. Also, something very interesting about Me Too, it very much, again, focuses on Hollywood, wealthy women, and this video is actually mentioning that, but I don't think they're really noticing that, and it's almost like they're not realizing that feminism was never really for the working class women, the women of color, the housewife, religious women, even though I don't agree with the Abrahamic religions at all, but still, like, I'm sure that most Christian or Muslim or women who follow faith cannot really relate to feminism. And this is, again, the thing, it's very much for the upper middle class, left wing, usually white elite. And even this whole idea of intersectional feminism, it's just not really true. And this is actually something, I actually have an article about this, about female genital mutilation, because female genital mutilation, FGM, is probably one of the largest problems facing women in the world right now. And it disproportionately affects poor ethnic women, and I'm sure there are, small activist groups working to work on that, working to change that, but in terms of the broader Anglo-centric feminist movement, there isn't a huge movement, and I think that we need like a time's up for FGM, but we don't. We have time's up for, as usual, the elitists, the wealthy, the Hollywood women, and it's just so cringe. It's like, why should I align myself to a movement which is not really resonating with me? I'm not white, I'm not left-wing, and I made a video recently talking about the rise of right-wing women in politics, and the feminists don't support them because their politics don't align with feminism, because, again, they're individual, hardworking women who have mostly conservative politics. Conservative women, or libertarian women, like I would consider myself socially liberal but fiscally centrist, just can't relate to feminism. We can't relate to this whole very, very groupthink, collectivist idea. It's rooted in neo-Marxist politics. It's just not something that resonates.
And I can organize on the ground and talk to everyday people, the people who I connect with and work with, about how we keep elevating this conversation and what work has to happen.
After 2 decades of girl power and girl bosses, the Me Too movement showed that mainstream feminism could be political. It could go beyond blandly saying women are great and start demanding concrete changes and accountability. But although Me Too was a departure from the empty mainstream feminism of the previous decades, that doesn't mean it was a long-term success. Few men were actually toppled from their positions of power.
Why do you want to topple men from positions of power? Like, do you want to replace all men with all women? Do you want to replace the patriarchy with a matriarchy? Also, just a note on this, there's this whole feminist notion that most political positions are held by men. Yet if we look at the UK, for example, okay, most powers of politics are held by men. Well, what has come with that? The right to vote, equal pay, abortion, which was legalized in the UK in 1960 by Enoch Powell, a man, marital rape becoming a crime. Like, okay, so just because more men are in politics doesn't mean that women are oppressed. Men are still making policies which are helping women.
And as a result of all the hype, in some ways, women began to be treated worse, with Forbes reporting that fewer women were being hired as a result of the movement.
Well, yeah, because probably men don't want women to be accusing them of rape or sexual harassment.
Women were more affected by COVID-19 job losses than men, with Hispanic women being hit the hardest. Women have been openly ridiculed and disrespected by our political leaders, and much-needed policies to support working mothers through family leave and subsidized childcare have failed to go anywhere in Congress.
Yes, because feminism has literally never been about helping the lower working class women.
Mainstream feminism has always been better at selling catchphrases than solving the problems of gender inequality, because, frankly, it's a lot easier. Meanwhile, with the feeling of powerlessness for women who'd invested in this movement and not seen results, came a tidal wave of burnout.
A sort of professional class, lean-in style feminism doesn't speak to a generation that feels like the work world in general is a site of hostility and oppression.
As mainstream feminist rhetoric has failed to offer up real solutions to any of women's problems today, young Americans across the political spectrum have lost faith in it. Countless feminist publications like The Hairpin, Bitch Media, and Feministing failed to stay afloat, some even before the pandemic. And in the absence of a compelling feminist movement, there's even more space for an increasingly loud and bold right-wing backlash to gain power.
How could I be a feminist? I admire chivalry, I'm not angry, and I've yet to burn a bra.
The pro-life campaigners leading the wave of abortion bans sweeping our country typically vote against policies that can improve the lives of mothers and their babies.
You know what's really interesting? There's a American feminist organization called Feminists for Life, which is actually a pro-life feminist organization. They never talk about this, do they? It's so interesting. They always frame abortion as all women should be supporting abortion, yet there's a very, very large body of women who are anti-abortion, and it's just so interesting how they completely almost dismiss that. They dismiss pro-life feminists or conservative feminists.
And in the aftermath of the vitriol directed at Amber Heard in her highly publicized defamation trial with Johnny Depp, women who accuse men of assault are becoming targets, or they're increasingly afraid to come forward at all.
I receive hundreds of death threats, thousands since this trial.
So Amber Heard got what she deserves. This channel supports her even though she was abusive. It's because feminism, they can't admit that women can be abusive.
Promisingly, while we're not yet seeing a coherent, hopeful feminist movement, we are seeing evidence of a hunger for something new, different, and bold. Women are returning to feminist media coverage on publications like Jezebel, The 19th, and blogs and newsletters. In the aftermath of the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe v. Wade, reporting on women-centric political events is seeing a sharp rise in traffic. Popular celebrities are also embracing more overtly political expressions of feminism. What's clear in these trends is that women are seeking something more concrete than the vaguely pro-female lifestyle brands of the 2010s or the performative, social media-centric outrage feminism of the Me Too movement. The central question of feminism is, are women materially and politically disadvantaged?
No. Women are not materially and politically disadvantaged in the West.
If the mainstream feminism of the past decades is dying, that's because it's time for a new one. One that's a little less worried about being cool and popular and a lot more concerned with getting things done.
Especially now, we must celebrate our art by protecting our right and our truths.
So I watched this 14-minute propaganda video twice, and it is very cringe. I mean, I do agree to some extent that feminism should be more about action, but the problem is that actions are rooted in propaganda. For example, abortion, as I have said throughout this video and in other videos, abortion is not really a feminist issue. It's more of an issue of religion versus secularism. Making it into a feminist issue simply alienates people because most people don't associate with feminism. And likewise, there are, as I said, many pro-life women. Religious women, conservative women who don't support abortion. And even myself, while I am pro-choice, I don't think that we should have abortion on demand. I think that things like birth control, contraception, condoms, and women taking responsibility, I think we need to be promoting that. We need to promote women taking responsibility, because if women take more responsibility over our sexual choices, then we will see less abortions. And this whole idea that, oh, abortion, it's like it paints it as a very one-dimensional thing, because at the end of the day, terminating a life inside of you like that isn't something that I think should be celebrated. And I remember when I watched the TV show Miss America, which I'm going to be doing a video on, and there was this scene where like it cut to a young Gloria Steinem having her abortion, and then it cuts to her as an adult just dancing around, and it's like, why are you celebrating the termination of the potential for life inside of you? Like, no, obviously a fetus is not a human being, but it's still a potential for a human being. And so I do think abortion should only ever be a last resort. And I don't think that the whole feminist view on abortion on demand is... yeah, anyway, so what exactly do women need feminism for? Being a woman in the UK and doubtlessly in the USA is one of the most privileged positions a person can be in. I think women should focus instead on our personal growth and stop looking to some mass movement to solve all of our problems. Feminism teaches women that we are systemically oppressed, and I never felt oppressed on the grounds of being a woman. I do have many problems, I've had many struggles, but feminism has not been there to help me out. Feminism has done absolutely nothing for me. I owe nothing to feminism, I have nothing to thank feminism for, and I refuse to be coerced into adopting some collectivist, radical leftist ideology that constantly tells women that we have it so hard and paints men as the enemy. I have no idea what feminists living in the West are even fighting for. We have equal pay, even though the feminists keep telling us that we're paid less for doing the same job, which is bullshit. And more importantly, what about men? Here's the largest hypocrisy. Feminism does not care about men's issues at all. It views men's issues as a non-issue. It's not a gender equality movement. It's a lobbyist movement rooted in misandry and telling women that we are oppressed and wanting all women to join hands and become militant activists. It presents such a negative and angry way of looking at the world. I don't think there's much positivity for women to view the world through such a negative and rather one-dimensional lens. What do you think? Do you think that feminism is dying? One can only hope so. Have you ever watched The Take? Would you be more interested in seeing more of this reaction style sort of video on my channel? Do let me know below. Thank you for watching. For further discussion, consider joining my Facebook group, Liberals Against Feminism, below.